What's up, Zox fam? We're back with some more Godforge. Now, I wanted to get into this video that was recently posted answering all the hard Godforge questions from Fateless Games. Now, I wanted to touch on this because for those of you guys that don't know, my background, I actually specialize in basically bridging the gap between content creator, developers, and community. So I am a gaming consultant to a degree. I've worked with many of major companies, and I mean, like, not just saying like, oh, I just work with them, like sponsorship. No, like I actually was contracted by them to do work for them, not only on just the strength of creating content on the game, but actually helping them with things as far as like culturally depicting characters properly, or being able to give monetization advice that could work not only for them as the company, but also what could be beneficial or lucrative for players as far as them finding the value in what they would like to put their money into, etc. So I've seen a lot of things, and I've been doing this for the last 8 years, just being able to see different things as far as, you know, what players want, what developers are looking for, and of course, what content creators are looking for. So I'm hoping I can offer some really well-rounded, just thoughts, right? I don't want to say necessarily just advice because, hey, I'm just a regular dude, really, at this point. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and let's dive into what the Fateless team has to say.
That's cool. So I'm just going to pull up random comments from, not random comments, I'm going to pull up comments which were quite frequent from the community and just kind of give the kind of dev diary answer to it really and give you a sense of what's going on. So Brevin Prince here, I was hoping for a bit more distinction between your game and Raid. Seems like a Raid clone with a new theme. Combat looks like the same down to turn meter and stuff like that. Okay, similar level 60s, Ascension, that type of stuff. So we are making a turn-based hero RPG, a hero collector RPG. Obviously, most people from this community have come from Raid. And yeah, I mean, we're using some of the same mechanics that you see in Raid. But this is not a Raid clone, by the way.
Okay, I'm glad he said that. So I think that it's really important to identify what a clone is versus what is standard within a game, right? So for example, I come from many different turn-based games. I've not just made a name for myself, but I've covered them, and I've been, like I said, very successful on them. So obviously one of my more recent ones, which was Dislight. I've covered games like Summoner's War way back when. Skylanders, there's a slew of them. Superstring. I mean, God, there's a lot that I've covered over the years. Epic 7 even, right? And one of the things that you're going to find that fundamentally exists in these games is things like level 60 characters, things like ascensioning the stars to be able to get some extra component or powering up on the characters, even just down to who gets to go turn meter wise. Usually sometimes developers will throw in something to kind of spice it up to give their unique flair or take or approach to it. But this is just kind of how turn-based games have just always existed for the most part, right? And I would even argue that within the gacha space and just mobile gaming space, this is kind of the standard foundation. And then from there, you kind of diversify, right? So these are just kind of metrics that you have within the game to be able to, I would say, identify, or just to kind of give players an idea of what a max character is. What exactly are you aiming for, right? We want to aim for level 60. We want to aim for 6-star ascension. Because I promise you, I've come from games like, for example, Dragon Blaze, where they decided to go past level 60, past ascension 6 stars, right? And it can sometimes become a little bit too much, right? You find that the game becomes more pay to win. And when you're not within the confines of certain parameters, it definitely can make it to where players don't exactly know what they're aiming for. And that can be discouraging too. Like, you don't have like an end game goal, right? Like, you always want to make sure that it's easy to identify early game, mid game, and end game, right? So these are just standardized things. And this is the only game I've seen this comparison happen with. I've seen it happen with, like, for example, more recently, another game that I was covering, Weather and Waves and Genshin Impact. They're like, oh, Weather and Waves just looks like a clone of Genshin Impact. But it's like, well, this is just fundamentally what a open world game would need. And then from there, you have your own unique flares. Like, Weather and Waves has the ecosystem, whereas Genshin Impact has the elemental system, where that's the kind of like big diversified aspect to the game, right? So it just kind of all depends on like what game you're looking at. But I will say that I don't think that this is a clone in any regard. Even when we're talking about themes, I mean, you have a lot of other games like the King Arthur game. You have Watcher of Realms, that all have very similar visual appeals, but they're still all different games, right? So that's my take, at least on that.
Is just a game from this genre. Okay, Summoner's War was, what,
Yeah.
5-6 years before Reign.
Right, the Summoner's War.
Has been out forever.
Galaxy of Heroes.
You've got the anime group, like the Epic Sevens. And if you go back,
I still play Epic 7.
Final Fantasy 7, like these games have been around for a long time.
Yep.
Okay, and a lot of what we see in terms of the things you're calling out as a clone, level 60 max, well, that's been around for a long time in a number of different games.
Yep.
Even to the point where, playing World of Warcraft, hitting level 60, that was your max. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff which just feel comfortable to have in the genre. Now,
now it's something that he said that's actually really important. I don't think that sometimes as a consumer, it's easy to identify this. But things that feel familiar makes it easier to digest something, right? And what I mean by that is that when you have the ability to find something be familiar or it feels comfortable, because sometimes people will ask things like, why does a game use a similar UI? Like, oh, these games all have the same UI. Well, the idea for most companies is that they typically look at things through the lens of why fix something that's broke, right? If it's going to overall garner people's attention or they're going to feel comfortable with it, they typically don't change. Now, granted, right? I'm one of those guys that loves to see unique takes and approaches, but I think it's also one of those things where you have to kind of look at like what's going to guaranteed reel someone in versus what's not, right? And sometimes changing your interface or UI things might not necessarily be that thing versus like maybe a mechanic or gimmick, right? So there's a lot of different factors as to what, again, the company is looking to do versus what they want to do for players, etc. Like there's a lot of balance that kind of has to be hashed out in that regard, but it is really important to identify that these are just things that just kind of exist and they always have. And it's not just within this genre. I think that that's another thing that has to be emphasized.
Almost every single thing that we're doing, we've had the conversation internally to say, is this where we innovate? Okay, is there much benefit to innovate to say, oh, hold on, we don't level to 60 in our game, we level to 100. And we've had this exact conversation. It's like, well, all you're doing is you're changing a number. So we want people to come into the game and understand that
and kind of know what they want to do.
This genre, and feel comfortable with that. Because when they get into some of the areas where we're innovating, that's going to be where their brain needs to say, okay, I need to learn some new things. And if you're learning new things all over the game, almost trying to create your own genre, well, for a new studio, that's extremely risky. Okay,
that's very, very risky. I feel like you build a rep, and that's kind of one of the things that you see like with companies like Hoyo or Little Games, or even now with Hypergriff with Arknights, right? They're jumping into all different genres now because they already established themselves as, we have this reputation, this is what we do well. We either storytell really well or we create really good game quality or gaming content. So now we're going to take that and we're going to further expand. And I think that, like, again, what Simon is doing with the Fateless team is actually really smart, right? Again, it is really important that they do take in player feedback, but they also don't want to lose the vision of what they have. And this is one thing, I will say this 1,000% as a fact. This is one thing that has hurt Wuthering Waves, which was supposed to be like the truly, honestly, like the Genshin competitor. It truly was. But one of the things that really did damper the game was that they lost their identity by taking in too much feedback on things that changed the core identity of the game and not things that just made the game better. So it's like trying to separate and identifying what's going to make the game better versus what's changing our game's identity. And that's something that you don't want to lose. If you have a vision with it, and this is just my message to the Fateless team. If you guys have that vision and you feel like, hey, this could possibly be something, I would always say go with it first. And then if you need to adjust later, then you can always work on that versus changing it because people might not necessarily like it, or you're kind of getting a feeling some people might not like it, because overall, who knows what can happen on the launch of the game. It might be well received, or people might realize that, hey, you know what, this actually is pretty cool. It's not as bad as I thought it was, right? So it's a lot of things that I feel like a lot of companies have failed at just because they were trying to be so pleasing and appealing that it even like started to tear away at the actual core identity of what they wanted their product and or game to be. So again, I think that that's honestly a really solid decision.
Thing to do. So some things are very similar to what you've seen in other games. Some things we're bringing with our own flavor to it, and some things are just going to be new. Most of the stuff which is just new, nobody's seen outside of the development team because we're still a year from launch.
Yeah.
And it would be very easy for any competitor in the genre to literally pick up the new thing and say, we can turn that on in 3 months. And
now you lose your identity.
Godforge, good luck.
Yep.
Yeah, because then it looks like we've just copied a whole bunch of stuff from other people. So rest assured, the whole kind of like, is there going to be more distinction between your game and Raid? A lot of the basic things around the type of game it is will feel similar, but not just Raid, to this genre. And there'll be plenty of stuff where you're like, damn, that feels really cool and very different. So I guess rest assured. What we got here, Viking never die. I was thinking using the mythology as your base won't it in the long run prevent you from adding new champs? Sooner or later, the divinities will run out, won't they? Type of thing. So, I mean, literally, easily, we could go to 1,000 gods and not even scrape the surface.
Yeah, that is 100% true. Like I said, I come from another game called Dislight, which actually hones in and focuses on multiple different mythologies, which is one cool thing that really drew me into Godforge is that it's focusing and honing into a lot of different mythologies. Mythology like is just one of those like forever like going things. And the thing is that they can always add more. Like that's the thing, right? Like just how we have factions in a lot of other games, they can always add more, right? And I think that that's something that really honestly is something to be excited about is it really is honestly never ending champions. Like you can even go into different variations. You can like go in and say, we want to create this, right? Like, cause once you kind of establish your own audience and player base, then you can start kind of getting into those more unique takes and approaches and appeals and different things that makes it a part of your universe as Godforge and not just Greek mythology or Egyptian mythology or, et cetera, right? So I think that, again, that's actually a funny question just because it's like, dude, you must not know. It's a lot of these dudes to go into. And that's, for me, what is also exciting because that's more lore, that's more storytelling, more combat, more animations, hopefully, more synergies we could possibly see. This is going to be the biggest basis of the game. So I think that is something that's really, really exciting.
And that's if we were just using gods. We're using gods, myths, and legends.
Yeah.
And we've seen some really interesting stuff from the community around, what does a legend actually mean? Is the kind of the Loch Ness Monster a legend, for example? Is a Yeti a legend? So on and so on. Oh man, what's his name? Robin Hood. Is Robin Hood a legend? There's a whole bunch of stuff that we could do. Jack the Ripper, is he a legend? Should he be in the game? So there's almost an infinite pool of opportunities in here. I don't think in any way would be restricted in terms of hero.
They're never going to be restricted.
Looks great,
to be
honestly.
honest.
Yeah, it needs a ton of polishing, but the base of the game looks amazing. Great UI work. Yeah, send love to my designers, whatever. One thing I must point out, you want to have double character animation speed, but not the whole game speed. Yeah. This is something we've already fed back internally. So when we're playing, you can see when I've got 2 times on at the moment. Everything is at 2 times. Like the flags. The trees,
you want just the character to
shouldn't
move.
do that. It should just be the character's animations that speed up. So we have already picked up on that, and it's we are in pre-alpha, remember. So any stuff like that. Firstly, we thank you for the feedback. But yeah, we are on it. Any communication, we see this a lot about pay to win. How pay to win will the game be? So we haven't worked out pack prices. We haven't done all of that stuff yet. This game has cost millions of dollars to make, or will have cost millions of dollars to make when it goes live. It has to have payment methods in the game. So what I would say to you is, we want to make sure there's plenty of ways to earn cool rewards as a free-to-play player.
Yeah.
We're going to have game modes which are specifically free-to-play centric. And by that, I mean normalized modes. Or you'll be making options where, irrelevant of your champion pool, you'll be playing on a level playing field with anyone who spent any money in some game modes. Okay, so, but there will still be an element of you can buy shard packs or crystal packs. You can, you can buy more energy. Like, those things will happen, because we do have to monetize in some way, and ultimately it's a free-to-play game.
Yeah, so I will say this on that topic because I think like you have to also understand the value of what a free to play like players' stance is, or versus a pay to win. And I think it's really important to understand, like, as a free to play, I would say that what a lot of people actually don't realize is one of the most important spenders in a lot of these games is not even the super whales that are like spending the tens of thousands of dollars. Typically, they make up anywhere from 1 to 2% of most player bases, depending on the game. Usually, the most important is the guys that are in between. So the light spenders, the guys that are buying, season pass, battle passes, that might buy occasionally an energy pack or a monthly pack. Those guys end up accumulating and adding up to much more, for the game. So I feel like when you're referring to like the pay to win stuff within the game, there's always going to be some need for a gacha specifically to have something for those that are at the top or that want to be those guys to be able to flex. They need to have a reason to, right? So they have to have the ability to buy certain things. Obviously, depending on the reason is up to the company, but they need to have also a place to be able to showcase that. Now, I think that, of course, with that, having it be balanced out to where free-to-plays have a place where they can go and say, showcase their skill knowledge versus just like, hey, my wallet is strong, but no, my brain is actually strong and I fundamentally understand the game. That's something that is definitely going to diversify this game and separate it from a lot of other games, because that's, I would even argue, is why E7 has such a successful esports, is because they do have game modes within the game that allow players to be able to understand and learn meta and to be able to try their mettle. And they even run community events where people are able to participate in those things, where it's not based around how much money you've actually spent. And so I think that when you're looking at like as a free to play player, it's all about accessibility. Is there anything in the game you cannot do within reason of you being a free to play player? So it would be on the note of like any PvE content, like them staying away, or just making sure they're not involved in creating characters that if you don't have this character, you can't beat this content, right? You want to stay away from that type of stuff, I feel like, as a company, especially in 2024. And then I would say, like, when it comes down to like for pay to win, usually people that are paying to win, they're paying for the luxury of maybe having a character that can do something slightly better, like, right, having it on a release when its banner first comes out. It's for the idea that, like, say, for example, you can clear something in 4 minutes, but they can do it in 2, right? I mean, it just is what it is. It comes with the territory. The main objective, though, I feel like for a free-to-play is, can you clear something, right? Or is there something that you can work towards to eventually be able to clear it within reason? And so that's one thing that I really am hoping to see a little bit more within Godforge versus in like Raid. I feel like Raid is just an obscene amount of time you have, like, it is a long haul game, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, you have to put in a crazy amount of time in order for you to really start to see some of those true benefits of your account being, quote unquote OP or whatever you want to call it, right? But I do think that like having a healthy balance between the two would be really, really solid. And even just the expectation, them being able to communicate or explain what monetization is going to be like, I think it's a little bit too early with the game being a year out, because you have to factor like localization and a lot of other things to making sure that price points are fair to other regions and things of that nature. So there's a lot that kind of goes into this, and it's much deeper than I think the person that's just spending might not realize. Like, you have to also create things in a way, again, to recoup and make back that money that you might have invested. Because again, like you said, this game is going to be costing them millions by the time they're finished, and they have to make a profit, right? Like, that's kind of almost the entire point, I would say. Outside of just making a really cool game, you definitely want to see some revenue come out of it for sure.
Okay, so will there be better rates in shard pools and stuff like that? Yeah, probably, but not by a lot. Otherwise, these games get incredibly boring really fast. Okay, I've played games where you get everything you want really quickly.
You don't play them.
You're like, oh, that's got to be the best method. It's not. It's boring. It's really boring. So we still want players to have challenges in the game. And the only way you can have challenges in the game is if you don't just get everything given to you. You have to make strategic decisions based on what you have. So we're not going to be like egregiously pay to win, but there will be ways to spend in this game to speed up your progress, but never to the point where somebody who plays free to play for a long time couldn't catch up with the paid player. By the way, we're on basically all socials. If you want to get like screenshots of new heroes that come out and artwork of like background assets and stuff like that, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Reddit now. We're basically anywhere where there's a social. So feel free to join us on whatever makes most sense for you. So what's it saying here? Oh yeah, often asked, is this going to be mobile or PC? So the beta is going to be Android and PC.
Okay.
And then when we launch, it will be cross-platform. So Mac, PC, iOS, Android. And here, how do you sign up for the beta? You can just go to the Fateless website, which I'll pin down below, and you can just come on a very easy sign-up form there and come and join us in the Discord once you've done that. The closed beta will be early next year. I like the cinematic view. Okay, we're going to get a lot of kind of mixed views on this visual of the game.
Okay.
I like the cinematic view. I see everyone else hating on it. I want to see the detail. It makes it look like a high quality game. Raid and especially Watcher of Realms look worse when you get into gameplay. This makes it feel like every character is special and they get their own thing while characters stand back. Okay, so there's also, I think I've got screenshots up here where people don't like the camera. Awesome demo.
Yeah,
One point is that the camera might not work well with motion sickness. We've definitely taken that on board. Thank you for that. We've seen that a few times. And then DJ Beast here and a number of others. This game's looking good. If we could change the camera angle to see the battle from a different perspective, that would be a huge improvement. So yeah, this is one of those things, right? So going back to we don't want a raid clone. And then actually what we did is we looked at the kind of point of view in the remake of Final Fantasy VII, and we're like,
oh yeah, I can see that.
This feels way more interactive and cinematic as you're kind of like going through this character view. Slightly different to what we've tried to do because we won't be as dynamically moving our characters around. But anyway, we like this view. We also looked at the most successful game in the genre by quite some way right now, which is Honkai Star Rail.
Yeah.
And again, similar type of thing, focused on the one character when it was doing their ability, and then kind of like slips back into the team when you need to. Now, these are a couple of the, I guess, inspirations for the game view that we've currently got. So if you look at our kind of like game view, but there's a few differences, right? So right now, let's just go to 1x speed. Right now, we don't have all of the kind of like animations slick. We don't have it take up
the entire screen. Yeah.
We don't have it spinning around to show you when you want to buff your team properly. We don't have it spinning behind the team when the enemy are attacking. So there's a few things which we definitely were going to change anyway. And some of the timing's off on animations, basically because of where we are in terms of timing, like pre-alpha, all that type of stuff. That being said, we can change cameras as we choose to, and we're definitely taking that feedback seriously. What we actually really want to do is wait until we've got it slick so that it feels good,
and then see how people
are able
feel.
To play that close
yeah,
beta,
that makes sense.
And then we can make some decisions on whether or not we just want to change it up. But we've definitely taken the feedback on board. You know, that's the whole reason for having, you know, this type of channel and a community that's so close. There's also, though, an element of people don't like change until they've experienced it for a while. Until we've got people actually playing the beta and, you know, get some proper live feedback, it's very difficult to know whether it's just like, oh, it feels different, so therefore I'm a bit scared of it, whether it genuinely doesn't feel as good. After I've been playing it for a while, I actually love it. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
I feel like it feels way better, and that's before we've cleaned up all the animation and stuff. So, you know, we've seen a lot of people in comments say, I really like it, and we've seen a lot of people in comments say, you need to fix it, which is a bit of a silly term, but you need to change it. Okay.
So I will say this on this topic as far as camera angle. I think personally, like this kind of does go into like maybe options are a good thing for, you know, to allow players to be able to pick. But I would at least say this is still going to be a core part of the identity of the game. I think that that's one thing, again, when you're talking about like the artistic direction that you want to go in or the vision of your game, you have to kind of stick to your guns with that. I think that the reason why HSR, like granted, I've heard people say they don't like HSR, and I've heard even more say they love HSR, especially on, you know, the note of combat. And I think that that's kind of one of those things, like you have to kind of stick to your guns as far as what you want the identity and the vision of your game to be. And I think that when we're talking about camera angles, yeah, saying saying just fix it isn't necessarily like the most constructive thing. I think that definitely when you're talking about I would say just the accessibility is also a good approach. Like, hey, can we have the option to change it? I think is great. Because I would even argue that maybe even the angle where people want things more panned out so they can see the full team isn't favorable to everyone, right? And there's plenty of games that, like, I mean, even talking about just in a turn-based genre period, where they don't even show you, like, if you guys ever play like Dragon Quest would literally just show you the enemies, and you have like a little pop-up icon of your character. So like, there's a lot of different approaches to what is quote unquote appealing or pleasing to a person when you're talking about turn-based games, because it's not always depicted in that format. It can be very different in each game, and sometimes I think that with that you kind of start going a little bit more into creative approach or creative identity, and that's something that's going to be a little bit rougher to just change, on hand. I think the best thing that they are going to be doing here is allowing players to actually get their hand on the product, testing the game out, seeing whether or not they actually like it from experience and not just from seeing it. Because I think that also, too, you can get a different vibe, especially if they polish the game more. And I think that that's another thing I want to mention, too, is that I'm being constructively, like, critical of the game from the point of the game still being a year away. Like, it's still in development. It's one thing when they're like, if they come out and they say, hey, if they would have been like, hey, this is our finished product, and then the game still looked the way it did, then there's like, okay, wait, this is no way you're going to release this finished, right? But because that they keep reiterating, I feel like Simon says it all the time, like, hey, our game is still a long ways away. What you guys are seeing, this is part of the process that you guys have to also understand that most of the time we typically don't get to see. Sometimes us creators get the exclusive opportunity to be able to do like live streams from tech tests and stuff like that. But a lot of the times when we see certain things, we're kind of getting more of like we're probably a couple months off from being done versus, hey, we're almost a year away from being done. So we usually don't even get this firsthand look. So I think that, just kind of having some grace in that area is fair. You still can give and still should give constructive feedback on how the game looks. But I think it is very, very fair to say that there is going to be a lot of changes that are just going to innately happen because they're just not finished yet, right? So again, I feel like all in all, they've done a pretty solid job with giving us some base animations and base visuals. But of course, it doesn't mean that things can't be made, to be better. I think that those changes are just going to happen. Just try to be as constructive as possible with the feedback you're giving. Like, why exactly would you like to see that change? Which I think is the biggest thing, right?
Hey, so we're taking it on board, and it might be that we just introduce a second camera angle as a possibility when the game goes live.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, it takes extra time, extra development work, all that type of stuff. But we will see after the beta if people still feel that kind of same way. But definitely taking that feedback on board. Here we go. So we got Ray Hawk here. What's he saying here? Oh, yeah, it'd be cool if there was sidekicks, pets that you could summon as well. And it'd give you stuff like blessings. Cool idea. This isn't like a repeated one. It's just, I love it when people come into the Discord and actually come with a cool idea. So I'm not saying we're definitely going to implement this. I had a very similar idea to this, but it went in a different direction. But we've got an area of the Discord here at Fateless where we've got an area for innovation and ideas.
Yeah.
And we've got these kind of like game idea mega threads where people just come and give ideas. Now, some people come in and they literally just say like, make game good. And you're like, great feedback. What can I do with it? I literally can't do anything with it. Whereas if someone comes with an actual idea, you know what? I read every single one, and some stuff we're actually implementing on the back of cool ideas. What's interesting as well is, people that say, is this just a clone of Raid? If you've got cool ideas of
give them to them,
how we could really be different, we are all ears. Like, we're literally wide open to taking those suggestions in. So feel free to bring them along. As I say, I read every single one. We've got here, a god. Have an in-game trade system where you can post the champion you want to trade to other people and be able to haggle with them. I really liked the idea of this. We've kind of gone back and forth on a marketplace in the game, on a trade system in the game, all of these things. Every single time we go down this road,
yeah, I know he's going to say botting or something.
Back with unfortunately, people cheat these
Yep,
systems.
there it is.
Bots
There
come
it is. Yeah, bots. Listen, guys. I'm telling you guys firsthand. For those of you guys that don't know, I also have a very, very predominant, MMO background. I currently have another channel that's going really well right now. I'm covering a game called The First Descendant, and they're also considering adding a trading system in it. It's a AAA game though, free to play. And the interesting thing about this, right, is that there's so many games that could honestly have amazing trade systems. But what happens as soon as trade systems are implemented is, and I kind of give you a rough idea of how someone could essentially go about doing this, right? With implementing a trade system, on the topic of like hacking and things of that nature, what sometimes happens is that people will then start to make excess or extra accounts to be able to trade those valuable resources with other accounts, right? Like say, they'll make bot accounts that's just going to farm infinitely or 24/7 that's going to get X amount of resource or X resource to be able to just trade it back to their main account and stuff like that, right? So this now leads to more work needing to be done on the development background side, where they're going to have to now monitor those bots accounts, see where that stuff is being traded to, ban those accounts. And then the thing is that you would think that would stop people, but it doesn't. They just go and they make even more bot accounts, because in their head, it's like, well, hey, they could take that one. I could just make 1,000 more, right? And so you then also have to think about the buying and selling, which is just another thing that usually in most TOSs of most games is actually not okay, right? Like TOS in most gaming communities, if you go into them, they'll tell you no selling, no talking about trading accounts, like things of that nature. So this is another big predominant thing that kind of unfortunately hurts systems like this that would actually be really cool. And then the other thing is too, is that like when you're dealing with a gacha game that's already so fixated on a system that is already requiring a player to have to save up resources, pulling on the gacha, etc., it kind of would fundamentally, especially if it was like you can, say trade champions, right? It would kind of almost defeat the purpose in a sense of the gacha to a degree, unless they were able to figure out a way to make it work where it didn't really devalue the gacha. Because if, for example, I knew rate up character came out, start a fresh account, then, level that account up to X amount to be able to trade, and then just trade that for whatever, that again would be leading you to that point of just getting whatever you want on your account and honestly taking away the fun out of the game. So I think that that's something that like, it's definitely a thought, but I think it's a lot harder to actually execute because it requires a lot more work than most people actually think it does. And that, of course, is a lot of the times you have to have a specific person that is just focused and, worried about that. I think there's a guy that I actually like to watch on Twitch named Pirate Software. He actually, I think, did some work for Riot Games, if I'm not mistaken, where his only job was just to catch hackers, right? So that's a full-time job. So yeah, it's just a big thing that just kind of exists within these games and sometimes makes it harder to implement these systems.
They farm shards, they farm the ability to summon, and eventually they'll get the champion you want. People trade with the bots, and eventually, people are just kind of these OP accounts because they're cheating the game.
Yep.
I've got this real thing that I hate. Like, I hate people that cheat to win. And I don't want to put a system in the game where literally it helps people cheat to win. So it's unlikely we're going to do this just because of the fact that I just said that.
Unfortunately,
Gecko Mayhem. I do not envy the mammoth task of game balancing. Just watched that demo. Made me think of all the different combinations of abilities, the strategic use of ultimate moves. Yeah, that's quite a cool thing it's quite a good thing to call out, actually. So our ultimates, there is an element of strategy to them. So you will be able to save your ultimate.
Yeah, for like casting whatever you want is actually pretty big.
Charging up down here on the bottom left. You'll be able to sort of save up the use of an ultimate to the point where you think it's going to be the right time to use it. And there definitely will be strategy to that, because different heroes will gather their ultimate strength in different ways. And some of it is just by taking turns, but also there's going to be, some people get their ultimate up through killing stuff. Some people get their ultimate up through debuffing, and all sorts of different things. So at some point you can get to all of your team having their ultimate ready at the same time. and you could unleash all of your ults back to back.
That makes sense.
So, but I think that's a cool element of strategy. So if I take it off auto for a second, whilst Anubis lays me down, I could be like, right, actually, it's not Zeus's turn, but I can use Zeus's ult.
Yep.
And I could also use Hercules' ult, etc. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do back to back to make those ults really interesting. But it's right what Gecko says here. That means there's going to be an ultimate. There's going to be an element of balance that's needed. And
1000%. Especially if there's going to be
scratch the
PvP.
surface of it, because there's other things which we've not released yet in terms of to the wider public, in terms of tricky things to balance, but will add a lot of fun to the game.
Yep.
So I guess this is a watch this space, but that's why Saf's in the team, the ultimate balancing king. He's going to be working hard to make sure that that's something that we do. So yeah. But yeah, cool call out. Definitely something that's on our minds. Pippin here, love the reliquary idea. Can see some really cool puzzles and community engagement. Okay. My concern is there's always, whenever you add something like, there's always, okay, well, what's the flip side? What's the concern with it? So my concern is you mentioning possibly needing a specific combination of heroes to unlock it in a gotcha hero collector game. It could be frustrating, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so yeah, that reliquary idea, it might be that you need a specific hero, a hero from a specific faction.
Oh, to be able to get something done. Okay.
Got a weapon from their faction, as an example. Or it might be to unlock this reliquary, you need to have 5 heroes of this faction. Or it might be you need 3 heroes of this faction and 2 heroes from this faction. You will find in the game clues in terms of what do you think you're going to need for this reliquary to open up.
Yeah.
But I can assure you, Pippin, it will never be you need Zeus, Hercules, and I don't know, Brunhild. Like these 3 specific heroes to unlock it. That's not what we're going for. It's just more of a kind of like community. Damn, I've just unlocked one, and this is what I was using. And then you're trying to decipher what it is and share with the community how you're getting into these different rooms where you can earn yourself some juicy fat loot. But yeah, good call out. Would be nice to see. So this is from Kay. Would be nice to see African warriors in the game. Maybe a Zulu couple, tribal marks and all. It's nice to have Egyptians. That's just one African culture. So I guess just to make you aware, we're going to have 10 different mythologies on launch, with the ability, obviously, providing the game is successful, to have more factions down the line. And I'd say out of the 10 factions that we're launching with, we've got really good diverse cultures. We've got the ones that people are more aware of, the Greek gods and stuff, the Egyptians, the Norse. And I've done videos about all of those. We're actually just going into now the Hindu area of our game and starting to explore those heroes. And damn, some of them are so sweet.
So I will say that, like, firsthand, that was one of the things that definitely drew my attention with the game, was that they are dabbling into that. And I think that the way that they're it's a term that kind of comes up quite a bit. And my thing with it is, I get it, right? Like, that was like one of the big things that I worked with Lilith Games, was making sure that characters were being depicted culturally correctly, right? So I mean, they went in an array of different directions, from covering like Islamic characters to obviously African American to Chinese, Japanese, Korean, like all different types, all different styles. And so that was something that was like really interesting. And I was actually really like happy to be able to work on that type of stuff with them, because it allowed me to learn so much more about different cultures and things of that nature. But I will say that I think it's, again, safe for them to start off where they're at, right? You don't want to bite off too much to chew, essentially, because you want to get to hitting some of those milestones. Like he said, like, if the game is successful, then they can consider implementing or making some more of these things work for the game, which I think would actually be really sick. And I think that that's, of course, going to lead us to seeing more of, some of the other gods from other cultures and things of that nature come into the game. I think also, too, sometimes it is hard to implement certain things, because you also have to think about, too, like popularity. Sometimes things are like the executive decision decision making behind why a certain god is implemented over another or created in the first place is because it's more of a potential predominantly known character. So you got to remember that this still is a gacha game, so they are going to have some aspects to it that would definitely still have people pulling basically for certain things because of the renownedness of that character, right? So I think that again, that could go into the specialty of what Godforge brings to the table, is being able to tap into different mythologies, gods, legends that aren't typically depicted in a lot of video games, and so that could actually be that special edge. But I think that again, they have to kind of build that rapport to be able to kind of determine whether or not that's the direction they want to be able to go in. But I will say, all in all, so far from what I've seen, some of these gods that I've seen or legends that I've seen that were not just necessarily Egyptian looking. Like there was some that looked like Africans. Like they weren't just all Egyptian based, which I think is kind of a neat thing to see. So I'm not really worried too much about them bringing that into the game. I just think it's just a matter of time, right? I think it's really just that. So I feel like what they are gonna do is like, yeah, they're definitely gonna do it. I don't see it being a thing they wouldn't do. It just, again, it kind of probably depends on the success of the game.
Yeah, rest assured, we do have a really cool diversity of different mythologies coming in. Oman here from the Discord. I need to know if this game is going to have an infinitely farmable PvE mode. So Oman has also, like, mentioned a number of times, I wish this game wouldn't have energy and stuff like that. It's a tricky one. So where you've got a game where there's like farmable resources,
Yep.
If you have no energy, then we're almost saying if you don't play this game 24/7, then you're going to fall behind everyone else.
Yep.
And
Very true.
we don't want to put that kind of like feeling on players that you should be playing the game 24/7 to stay keep up with someone else. And that's one of the reasons why energy is introduced into these games. Certainly that's one of the reasons why energy's in there. We will have game modes where you can play things like the normalized modes infinitely if you've got some skill and knowledge in the game. Yeah, so you'll be able to earn the ability to go back in and go again and go again. And there will be a number of different game modes where you could come in and play pretty much infinitely. I don't know if infinitely is the right word, but you could definitely
probably get a good amount
content and go again.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that you want to make sure you balance out within a game is creating a situation where players of all facets are able to get enjoyment out of it, but you don't want to create an overall burnout. Then it's like you also have to remember that there's other factors that they have to consider. They can't just consider just the free to play and the guy that wants to put in tons of time. They have to consider, okay, what are our parameters, right? Because yes, there are going to be those packs and ways to probably refill, either spending, premium currency, etc. But then even with the packs or refills, they have to limit that to, we want the players, even the spenders, to be able to scale this much within this amount of time. So that's another metric that is going to have to be figured out. And I mean, I don't know that 100% for this game, but I would say, at least from some previous games, it was like, after the first month to say 2 months to 3 months, the company actually had an idea roughly of where all those players should be if they were spending the top dollar versus not, and tried to keep everyone within those parameters. And I feel like a lot of the times you do that as well, so that you have a reason for players to want to come back and play your game. I think the other thing that kind of has happened sometimes with mobile gaming is that it's something that has become so much more vast that people have replaced their main source of gaming, which was typically like console-based stuff or even PC stuff, with mobile games, just because of the convenience or just the accessibility of having their phone on them at all times. But I think it is, fair to say that this isn't just a metric that they have to consider for, us here in, say, the UK or the US, but they have to also consider other countries. That's another reason why these energy systems actually exist as well, is because you have Eastern countries. If they ever try to branch out into, say, creating Godforge in China or Godforge in Japan, they have to factor in these energy systems, because those players actually have laws set in place that prevent them from being able to put X amount of time into the game. So it just kind of all depends on a lot of factors. How many servers do they want to have, do they want to create separate versions of the game so that there's, the CN one where they have these parameters and then the global one where they don't. And that sometimes can also cause issues because those players might say, hey, it's not fair that those players get to play more than us, and or vice versa. So it's a lot that kind of goes into it. It's definitely a lot. But I will say that like the biggest thing is that when you're talking about being able to infinitely farm in a game, it goes back into being able to just pull for everything, right? Like you don't want the game to be put into a position where, especially so early on, that players get on, they blast the game and do everything, and then they don't want to play anymore, right? Like they're bored, they don't have anything else to do. So that's a kind of one of those tough roadblocks I feel like most games have, and that's why you'll probably see more than not almost all games have some sort of energy system that you have to kind of play into for your daily stuff. So my only ask I would say is like, EXP bonuses, buff drops, having like, mail sent for, extra energy. Those things can be very beneficial or helpful, or even increasing of caps so that as you get stronger, you get more energy. So there's a lot of ways that they can go about giving more stamina, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily just this uncapped thing where you could just play all day.
So it's hard to answer this type of thing without showing you all of the different features we've got lined up, but there definitely will be plenty of playtime without the need to become, like a PvPer. I pulled this one in just because it answers a number of people's questions. So Manuel, I don't know how you say this. I'm so terrible at saying names. I hope that this game is in German too. So the release plan is that we will release in English speaking and look to be successful. Obviously, that's what we're hoping for, is success. And then we will start to localize. Certainly German is one of the languages which would be high priority because we know in Germany a lot of people play these games.
Yep.
But ideally, if we're able to be successful in some of the stuff we've got going on right now around investment and stuff like that, then we could do localization in terms of our launch much sooner into more regions. So, but yeah, English speaking is going to be our initial launch in terms of plans right now. There's something else which I just wanted to talk about, not really answering a question, but there's been a couple of videos that have come out. So basically, Wizard D Gaming had something here that was like Godforge on thin ice, and and Godforge on thin ice after releasing our pre-alpha. And we heard MTG Jedi did one on like why Godforge will fail. I think something like that. Anyway, it's so weird. So firstly, there's a ton of different content creators already doing Godforge content, which is cool to see. Here it is. Godforge will fail. And I've got to say, now being on the other side of the screen as a developer, when you see these kind of things, you're like, oh man, that sucks that, people have got that opinion already.
Yep.
Because you're so heavily invested in the game and the work that you're putting in. But it's also, it basically feeds back into what we're doing here. So, some of the context of this was like, are the models good enough? Are the character models up to scratch with what we see from other games? I mean, personally, I feel like for pre-alpha, we're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I agree.
Everything from here is increasing the quality of optimization. So the actual base models are very good. It's like shaders, textures, lighting, all of that type of stuff to just improve.
So I want to say one thing about that, right? Because I think that like with a lot of content creation stuff, like everyone's going to have an opinion. I can at least say being one of the guys that was on the top. So like I said, like for games like Dislike, I was the number one, still am like the number one creator for that game. Even after I decided to, put the game to the side, I still am in contact with that development team. They reach out to me consistently for other projects and things of that nature. But one of the biggest things that I had to kind of understand was being able to see the vision in something, right? And I think that a lot of the times, like when Dislike was in their initial beta, the game was bare bones. There was half of the content that the game, I would say almost 95. And this is a message of encouragement to the Fateless team. 95% of the content that Dislike currently has and that people enjoy and they love to play and they're cycling through and getting all these crazy rewards that they've revamped multiple times, that stuff didn't exist. And when I first started playing that game, I was creating content, making videos before the game was even hyped. And one of the things that I kind of found to be interesting was the expectation that the game had to be a certain way, and it wasn't even officially out yet. And I kept telling everyone, I'm like, guys, listen, this game, they have the vision, they got the right pieces to the puzzle. It's just when the official release happens, they'll be able to put everything together. And so I created on Dislight for about a year, about a year before it actually officially released. And the crazy thing is that there was so much about the game that changed over time. And so all those things that kind of could have been like concerns, or was this good enough or not good enough, it just kind of goes away just because, again, the game is in development. I cannot stress that. Like, there's going to be so many things that are not perfect, but it doesn't mean that it's not a good vision or it's not a good start. I think that I don't want to take away from that aspect of it, because I think that, like, especially being in that situation, it taught me so much about what actually is required when you're talking about game development and what actually happens, right? Like, what you see in a lot of these pre-alphas, betas are not the things that you're going to see in the finalized product a lot of the time. And so when companies allow you to have the opportunity, like I mentioned before, to have access to these things earlier, you have to sometimes take it as that, right? Like, it's just where it's at for now, but it's not going to be finalized like that, right? And so the biggest thing is that when you're looking at just the overall like character aesthetics and the things that we're seeing, like, guys, we're seeing, like, and this is just being realistic, we're getting for our leaks, we're seeing concept art. We're seeing, we're not seeing in-game models. We're not seeing any of that stuff yet for a lot of different characters that are being developed. And it's because it's still so early. And I think that with that, they're just trying to show us that they have things in the works, that they have vision, right? And I think that the biggest thing is that there's two different factors that I would say that this game has eons over other games. It's number one, communication, right? I think that that's the most important thing, because despite what criticism you give, if the company isn't communicating or doesn't give a damn about what you think, it doesn't matter what criticism, how many videos you make complaining, how often you complain, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything, right? So the fact that they're looking at these things, tackling the hard questions is the number one thing, right? But then the other thing is vision. I think one of the worst things is when you see a game and then they're not willing to try to push the limits and further evolving and, just doing more with what we can see. Because I feel like sometimes as consumers, we sometimes can see more for something. It's like, oh man, this would be so cool if they did this. But they're giving you guys the opportunity. Go in the Discord, give feedback, let them know exactly what it is that you might want to see. Because even with Dislike, like, and this is not like trying to flex or toot my own horn, but I've had community members. Like, I was in a position where the developers listened to me. I had a lot of people that I knew within the community that had really solid ideas. So I was able to bring those ideas to those developers. And I got a lot of character kits implemented from community members, right? And that was something that was so cool to see. Like, and I'm not, that guy that's just creating character kits. I'm not that good. But it was just cool to see that there are those individuals that exist within the community. And those are only a handful of people that I was able to see. So being able to see that they're taking in all and any feedback on things that could be implemented in the game, you might very well be the direct factor as to a character coming in the game and being a certain way, which I think is really, really cool. And so you want to take advantage of those things while you have the opportunity. And I would say is that I think just overall, we do have to have more grace with this game, right? I think that we all expect and want the game to be a certain way, but there's also just the unknown that just comes with most, and if not all games. We don't know what this game is going to be like at the end of the day. And I would definitely say, as far as them needing to earn or gain our trust, I think that they're doing the necessary things to do that. I don't feel like there's any other or extra things they need to do to gain our trust when they're already doing the number one thing that you don't ever really see many companies do, which is unveiling and showing us what it is that they're doing. And I feel like as long as they continue to do that, I will say on a business note, and if you run a business, you're going to 100% understand this, they can't tell us specifically every single thing. They can touch on certain things, but sometimes it's not it's not the better option to just say, hey, this is happening. Sometimes they have to say things like, hey, we heard you guys, this is in development and we're working on fixing it. And that's that, right? And that is more than enough in a lot of cases for us to understand that they are trying to communicate, because there are a lot of things that they maybe can't talk about, right? Like there are those internal things that, hey, we can't talk about that because it's not out yet, right? So there is going to be that give and take between what players can know and what they can't know. And we have to be, understanding to that. I think the biggest thing is just that they are communicating, and that the energy that they have now doesn't change when official launch comes out. That they continue to do things like this, like, hey, let's tackle and answer all of the hard questions within the community. And I really honestly think that that's going to be the bread and butter to a lot of their success. If they can have more people speaking highly of their game, saying, you know what, I love this game because they actually communicate and tell us what it is. Hey, this isn't working right now. We got to fix this. Or, hey, this is something that we plan on doing, and maybe giving us roadmaps. These are all things that kind of lead up to us having a great time in these communities. And I feel like it's just further into more of that community building.
Improve the game. But we're trying. We're like every single model that goes through 2D concepting, 3D concepting. Yeah. Every single one, we're like, does this hit the cool factor? Yes or no? And art is very subjective to how you feel, right? And there's also elements like, as I say, sometimes, which one is it? This one here. Sometimes the lighting is just not good enough yet. And lighting makes such a difference. Sometimes the textures we've got in play, like this here, don't feel quite right. Like it's too waxy type of feel.
Yeah.
The good thing is our 3D models are great. So then it just comes down to the technical art
re-rendering and
improving what we've got. Mm-hmm. But there'll also be an element where some people are just like, you know what? It's not good enough for me. And
that's perfectly okay.
It's hard. It's hard to hear, but I get it. We have to design with mobile in mind. So
yeah. So I think that that's one of the last things I want to say too, guys, is that like sometimes the higher the quality of the game, which again, I think they can execute very high quality on this game, and it still run well for most people. But yeah, the higher the quality of the game, the harder it is going to be able to, it is for them to be able to reach more people. And that's what we constantly are seeing. I would say one of the biggest complaints that I've seen on a lot of games that I've covered is that people can't even run the game on their phone because the quality is just way too high. And so it's like, hey, I thought we were mobile gaming, we're not trying to play on PC, right? So I'm assuming that there will probably be a higher def quality if you decide to play on PC versus mobile, which just kind of ends up being the case anyway. But I will say that, again, I implore Fateless and what they're doing with Godforge to keep and stay true to what their vision is. I would say that I personally believe, like, yes, you want to always give and listen to the constructive feedback of your community. But one of the things that I've seen, like, firsthand, like, I'll never forget. And I guess this is what I want to end this video off of, because I want you guys to, like, again, just become more personable with me. I've had all of my success because I seen things in the very beginning and I put my faith into them. Sometimes, you're not going to have the 100% answer to everything, and that's okay, right? I had a lot of people, especially with Dislike, like a lot of you guys that might not know, that game is actually the game that changed my life and was able to allow me to become a full-time content creator. My very first month of that game, I made about $15,000 in 1 month. And that was the most amount of money I've ever made in 1 month, right? And from there on, I've just been able to replicate that in many different ways, whether it be via contract, etc. To the point where now I don't ask my community for donations. I just literally get on camera, I vibe, make my videos. I promise you, it's been an absolute life-changing thing. And one of the things, even just from the creator standpoint, that really stuck out to me in that experience was I didn't listen to what everyone else was saying, in the sense of, like, I had a lot of people telling me this game's going to fail. This game's not going to do well for you. You're not going to be successful. You're not going to. And if I would have listened to any one of those people, I would not be here in front of you on this other channel that I'm just doing for fun, right? Like, this isn't even one of my main channels. It's like one of 7 channels that I have. And this is on a game that's a year out. So I'm not making any money from this. it just is what it is, right? I'm doing this because I genuinely see the vision and I want to support creators that are actually trying to do something different within the space. And I feel like one of the biggest things is that, I also believe in, also as you as a consumer, it is important to identify what you enjoy, right? Finding a game and being a part of a community in a game that you enjoy, this isn't going to be the game for everyone. And I'm not going to try to force it on all of you guys either, right? Like, this is going to be for those that genuinely enjoy what Fateless is bringing to the table and being able to offer their constructive feedback to help make the game better. But I think as far as shifting or changing the identity to be 100 or 1,000% what you want it to be, it's not going to be the case, right? Like, there's going to be something within the game that you might not like, and I feel like that's going to be the case for all of us, right? Like, as much as I have been hyping up a lot of stuff, there's going to be something that will come up where I'm like, I'm not the biggest fan. But you have to weigh the pros and cons of that. And is that enough to say that I don't want to play this game or this is a bad game? Which I feel like all in all, these are all things that you just typically see in pre-alphas and betas. And these are just the kinks that get worked out over time. They got the constructive feedback on things, that needed to be mentioned. I just think now it's just more so the application of everything. So I'm, for one, really excited, and I'm very proud of like Simon and the Fateless team for actually taking the time to tackle these questions. I don't think you guys understand. I've worked with hundreds of companies at this point, and I've begged companies to just address something. You don't have to tell the community, hey, this is the intertwining of what this is, but just at least say, hey, we heard you and we're working on it. That's going to make a world of a difference. And some of the companies that I've worked with, way bigger than Fateless, couldn't even take the time to do that. And so I have to commend them on just taking the necessary steps to communicate with us and just making sure that we're a part of the loop. Now, again, I'm always open to hearing you guys' feedback. I know that this is a fairly long video, but again, I feel like I do offer a lot of value when it comes down to just my thoughts and opinions on this specific topic. I can't say that for many of things, but I have done this successfully. I've made a good amount of money doing so. And I feel like, all feedback is good feedback, no matter how harsh it can be, as long as there's some sort of constructiveness that comes with it. But that's going to be that, guys, for this one. I'm not going to drag this one out too much long because it's already a long video. But all of you guys, stay safe out there. Once again, shout out to the Fateless team for just, like I said, tackling this head on. This is something I hope to continue to see. And I think, honestly, they're going to do an absolute amazing job over the next year. So that's going to be that, guys. Everyone, stay blessed. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.